first remote Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee meeting. I am joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Ryu, Buscaino, and O'Farrell. Ms. Kidd, would you please call the roll?
This call is now being recorded.
Waiting for Ms. Kidd to call the roll, but let me say something while she's getting her technology together. This is not just the first public meeting of remote meeting for Public Works and gang reduction. This is the first LA City Council remote committee meeting period. So we are testing out the technology. So I apologize in advance for any bumps in the road that people may experience in this process. We're trying to move toward normalcy. We've been working hard to do our best to respond to this pandemic, and as a city, we are stepping up to that challenge. And the staff have been juggling their responsibilities between the COVID-19 and the regular city functions. Both are incredibly important, but folks have been stepping up, and I especially want to give ITA a big shout out for putting this meeting together. It's not as simple as just getting on a Zoom meeting because of all public comment and our legal requirements. It requires a lot more to the process. The meeting today, we don't have a very heavy agenda. Really, we are doing proof of concept for committee meetings. We have a couple of items that we will, or at least one item that we'll have discussion on, but mostly we're trying to move forward on things that are, that have been in line, that need to go forward and be done administratively through this committee, that we want to keep the city functions going. And that's why we need to get all of our committees up and running as soon as possible, because the city needs to function. We've been great about keeping our essential services, our fire, and our police, and everything else, sanitation up and running, and that has kept the city going. But we also have a lot behind the scenes as a city that we need to do to make this city function, and part of that is moving the legislative, all the legislative bills through the process, getting them heard, getting the public comments, and the rest. So let's get started. Ms. Kidd, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Blumenfield?
Blumenfield, present.
Ryu?
Present.
Buscaino?
Here.
O'Farrell?
Here.
Martinez is excused. So we have a quorum. And the last thing I'll say, I was talking a little bit, is I want to give a special shout out to the Public Works bureaus. They have been pushing forward. We oversee those bureaus here in this committee, but they have been taking advantage of the lighter traffic on our streets to complete projects on busy corridors in a shorter period of time. They're not only responding to the pandemic, they're taking advantage of it in a good way for all of us. So just a big shout out for all the folks in Public Works who have been working their tail off to use this time when the city is basically in quarantine to fix our streets and go where they normally can't go. So we're very grateful for that. Now we're going to start this meeting with public comment on all items, which is a little unusual the way we normally do things. We'd go, item by item, but at the moment, it's a little hard to separate people by item, so we're going to take comment on all of the items. Now, this is a special meeting, so there is no general public comment. The public their comments must be related to items on the agenda. So for each item, you'll have 1 minute if you wish to speak. If you're speaking on more than one item, you'll have 2 minutes in total to cover all of the items that you wish to speak upon. So, Ms. Kidd, please provide the phone number for the public to call in and provide their comments on agenda.
Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 669-900-6833 and use meeting ID number 987-0899-4173 and then press the number sign. Press the number sign again when prompted for participant ID.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Chair,
while we're waiting a moment for people to call in, I just want to echo your comments and praise the Public Works Bureau and all of the bureaus within Public Works for doing a stellar job in the past several weeks and keeping things going. Across my district, it's the same story. So hats off to all of the professionals and all of the bureaus in Public Works.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Now, also, before we begin, I want to present recommendations for these items. Sometimes it's important that the public, that we telegraph whatever amendments that we're doing. That way, the public has the ability to comment on them. These are mostly administrative, but for item 1, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the draft ordinance transmitted on February 25th, 2020. For item number 2, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the revised ordinance transmitted on February 21, 2020. And for item 4, I'd recommend that we adopt the recommendations in the CAO report dated April 23rd, 2020. Again, for those calling in, remember to please mute the device you're on, that you're listening to the meeting on, before you begin your public comment. Folks in the public are listening to this meeting via Granicus or through the phone-in system. They are not listening directly through the Zoom meeting until they're actually brought into the Zoom meeting, and that's when they hear the meeting in real time. Otherwise, there may be a couple of seconds delay. So that's just a reminder to put whatever device you're listening to the meeting on mute or turn it down when you're calling in. So I'd like to begin with public comment. To have the first caller. They've been brought into the meeting here. Looks like they're here. So caller, please state your name and what items you're calling on.
Calling on all items. I'm here.
Mr. Spiller, good to hear you.
Good grief.
I'm here talking on all items, Bob and Boyle. Now, let's talk about the sidewalks and enforcing the law against homeless criminals. Homeless criminals, Bob. I've been calling you about them blocking sidewalks, and today you have a motion to let them take a bulldozer and get rid of those tents off the sidewalks. I fully support it, and I want to add a friendly amendment for one of those water cannons like you see in Beijing, better known as Peking, back when I was there in the day. Allegedly. So, I want the streets cleaned up, Bob. Also on Burbank Boulevard, there's a condominium complex being terrorized by a homeless encampment. I offer a friendly amendment that you should airdrop water from a water helicopter on that scumbag. So, now we get to all the other public safety meeting issues. For example, I'm on Zoom, and you're falsely stating under color of authority, please wait, the meeting host will let you in. Therefore, you're continuing the FBI's play-to-play scheme in an attempt to subvert public participation while spending federal and state dollars. More indictments, Bob.
10 seconds.
More indictments. And as we continue on the agenda,
Okay,
we have lots of overstealing.
Your time is over. Thank
Can
you.
I?
Mr. Spiller, thank you. Your time is up. Next speaker, next caller. Welcome. Please state your name and which item or items you're calling on. Caller, can you hear me? We may have a technical issue here. Is there a caller on the line? Okay, let's try the next caller. Is there a caller on the line? Apologize if we are having a technical issue here.
Hello?
I'm sorry, we've already had Mr. Spindler. Next caller.
Hello?
We've already spoken to you, Mr. Spindler. Next caller. Please don't admit the same number.
I muted again.
Okay, I'm
No,
going to
we're
ask the...
juice. I've got like,
Mr. O'Farrell, you're on. You need to mute yourself, Mr. O'Farrell.
I'm saying it's plugged in.
Mr. O'Farrell,
I can hear you, Mitch.
The power on, but it's still only,
We can hear you, Mitch.
Mr. O'Farrell, you need to mute yourself.
yeah.
Do we have any other callers?
Okay, so there's something right there.
We have callers that are not responding.
Needs to screen the incoming phone number so that Spindler doesn't get to call over and over and over again. So they need to be.
Mr. O'Farrell, would you please mute yourself?
Oh.
Thank you.
For the record, I had the same concerns as Mr. O'Farrell has on the...
Yes. As we're testing, we're the test
Yeah, of
pilot
course.
here.
Of course.
You know, that if the same person calls on 4 different numbers, it's a little more difficult to
Sure.
prevent that. Okay. Looks like we have another caller. Is that correct? Caller, are you on the line? Please state your name and what your item you're calling on. Are we having technical difficulties? I'm asking the staff. We're having someone who's calling and just either not responding or not able to respond.
They are not...
The caller has left the room.
Callers left. Are there any additional callers calling in?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so that exhausts the public comment period. If someone does call in later, we will try to accommodate. So unless there is an objection, colleagues, I'd like to move items 1 through 4 and 6 through 9 on consent.
Move the items. Buscaino.
Without objection, or actually, why don't we call the rolls? Everyone, Ms. Kidd, would you call the roll for items 1 through 4 and 6 through 9?
Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, aye.
Rue,
Rue, aye.
Buscaino,
Buscaino, aye.
O'Farrell.
Hi.
Okay, that's, those items are approved. And if we can now move on to item number 5. If you would read that into the record, please.
Yes, the Bureau of Engineering report in response to a 2019-20 budget recommendation relative to the status of testing alternative construction materials and designs for sidewalk repair.
Thank you. Well, this is an important item. I mean, it's a discussion item mostly at this point, but it's about maintaining our sidewalks. It's one of our city's core functions, and specifically it's about exploring new materials and methods that could be cost-effective and provide environmental benefits. It's been a passion of mine for a number of years. I had a motion back in March of 18, specifically directing that this study be done with the rubber tiles and other testing. I've been out to the testing site for Public Works where they do amazing things, and we've got scientists looking at different possibilities, because at the end of the day, we know if we can make a little bit of a breakthrough on some of our materials, we could do a lot more for a lot less. And that's ultimately what this is about. Not only doing more for less, but doing things that are better for the environment. Now, even though some of the materials that were tested didn't perform well, the testing is still in progress. And so at this point, I'd like to ask Robert Vega from the Bureau of Engineering to take himself off mute and provide a brief overview of this report. Mr. Vega, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Robert Vega, Program Manager for the Bureau of Engineering Sidewalk Repair Program. As noted, I'm here to report back on the status of testing alternative construction materials and designs for sidewalk repair, including testing results. To provide some background, the City Council approved establishment of the Sidewalk Repair Program Alternative Materials Pilot Testing Program in March 2017. The goal of the program was to install sustainable alternative sidewalk materials and facilities, which would then be inspected, monitored, and assessed. Based on the material's performance, as well as cost availability, installation requirements, and maintenance, the pilot program would provide recommendations for use on the sidewalk repairs. Upon establishment of the pilot program, the Bureau of Engineering implemented and tested 3 categories of alternative materials: recycled rubber materials and pavers, cementitious pavers, and alternatives to Portland cement concrete. 15 sites, with sites adjacent to city facilities, were selected for installation of alternative materials throughout the city. 7 sites were specified with recycled rubber pavers, varying in size and color. 3 sites were specified with poured-in-place recycled rubber. 3 sites were specified with cementitious pavers, varying in size and type, and 1 site was specified with an alternative to Portland cement concrete. Construction commenced in the fall of 2017, and the final site was completed in the spring of 2019. The sites were monitored and inspected on a preset schedule to document and evaluate the overall performance of the alternative materials, which included factors such as surface deformation, horizontal and vertical shifting, material settlement, permeability, and maintenance. The first round of inspection was conducted in the fall of 2017. Upon completing the inspections, the following was found. The 3 categories of alternative materials installed had varying degrees of performance. The cementitious pavers performed similarly to standard Portland cement concrete sidewalks, with the added benefit of water infiltration. During the testing period, they maintained a smooth, level surface and solid integrity without the need for any maintenance or repair. The alternative to Portland cement concrete, also known as slag cement concrete, also performed similarly to Portland cement concrete sidewalks. The surface finish and color were indistinguishable to standard sidewalk. Its cost effectiveness is equal to Portland cement concrete, and use of slag cement reduces the amount of carbon emissions. The rubber materials and pavers installations did not perform as expected. Generally, the testing materials had problems with deformation and failed to maintain a smooth and level walking surface. Product performance varied by manufacturer, which would create difficulties for the purchasing of uniform construction material for different sources. Other issues included development of a 2-foot by 3-foot hole in the poured-in-place rubber material, panel deformation that created sidewalk uplifts, and panels shifting out of position. Additionally, the rubber pavers were susceptible to theft. To see some examples of the alternative materials and how they perform, I'd like to direct you to Attachment A in the Bureau of Engineering's report to this committee, dated March 10th, 2020. And if we start on page 7, this is an example of a poured-in-place recycled rubber material installation. The material sagged down the center of the installation along its length. And at this location, a 2-foot by 3-foot hole has developed. On page 8, we have a recycled rubber paver installation. The condition we have is an uneven surface with gaps between the panels and uplifting at the edges.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I just had a question. Would you prefer we hold questions for Mr. Vega, or I just had a question on
Yeah, I mean, I prefer you hold the questions. If it's a clarifying question, if something's very specific, then go ahead, and
Right.
otherwise we'll have a discussion after he's finished.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Vega.
On page 9, we have an example of a cementitious paver installation. These are 4 foot by 5 foot wide porous sidewalk panels that have maintained a smooth, level walking surface and are in good condition. And on page 10, we have the sidewalk installation using slag cement concrete. It has the look and feel of Portland cement concrete and is in good condition. Additionally, on Table 1 on page 4 of this report, we've also provided a summary of the alternative materials used, the facility locations they were installed at, and the conditions of the material. In closing, at this time it is recommended monitoring continues on the cementitious pavers and to add an additional site for installation of slag cement concrete to further evaluate their use for sidewalk repairs. It is also recommended the rubber materials and paver installations be removed from the test sites given their current condition. This concludes my report, and I'm available to answer questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vega. Does BOE intend to test any additional rubber materials, or will further monitoring only be for the slag concrete in your view?
Well, one of the things that we will be doing is reaching out to the manufacturers of the rubber materials to come out and evaluate the conditions and see why they occurred. And we may do further testing on them. But really the recommendation is to move forward with the cementitious ones, continue monitoring the pavers, and to do another slag cement installation.
And what about the comparison about, I mean, clearly concrete is much more durable than these other materials. And
Correct.
Concrete is much more durable. But in making our decision about alternative materials, it's not simply a durability question, it's a cost effectiveness question. So if we found a material that only worked half as well, but it was cheap and quick to repair, then that might be preferable to something that works twice as well but is incredibly expensive and time consuming to repair. Have you guys done some analysis on that aspect of it, the cost effectiveness, not just the durability?
We've done some initial analysis. So with the cementitious pavers, the cost is higher, and that is because of it's labor intensive. So when we installed 4-inch by 8-inch brick, and so it takes more time. You're still doing the sub-base preparation as you would for normal concrete, but it will take more time.
That's a no-brainer when it costs more and it's not as durable.
Exactly. And a similar situation with the rubber panels. You're still doing the same type of preparation, but it is more time consuming to actually lay out those panels.
That's interesting. And what about, are there specifics like near tree locations or something like that where the rubber panels still have an advantage? Or you're saying at this point there's really no advantage to them?
Well, the concerns that we have is the shrinkage of those panels and then the uplifts. And as we showed on page 9, where that was a panel installation, there's a significant uplift there. So, it can create a barrier for a person with mobility disability, possibly being stopped or a tripping hazard.
Now, the proponents of it would claim that, it's the advantage is that you can just pull up a panel and pop another one down, and you can get these things fixed very quickly. But is that not the case? Or? They
can be removed. That is true. Again, but I am concerned. We are concerned about still meeting ADA compliance and not creating any barriers. So we'll have to weigh those factors out.
Right. And the slag cement is comparable in cost to the Portland cement, right?
That is correct.
So is there and it has the environmental benefit of being porous?
Yes, it has.
Right. So It sounds like, is there any advantage to Portland cement over slag cement?
Right now, probably the availability, because most concrete manufacturers are using Portland cement, but there are more and more that are moving towards the either slag or fly ash.
Mr. Buchanan, you had a question, and I know I'll give everybody a chance to ask questions.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first, just echo the comments of our chairman when he started this meeting, as well as Mr. O'Farrell, that how appreciative we are to the entire family. I, for one, have seen firsthand in my neighborhood a number of curb cutouts finally taking shape here in the southern San Pedro section. And I want to specifically recognize the street services Supervisor Junior Estrada, who I've had constant communication with. And I want to thank his crew for working in light of this pandemic and doing the work that continues that need to be done. I've also seen firsthand in these curb cutouts in my neighborhood, I'm able to see how they're able to preserve trees that have been uplifting our sidewalks. And I'm happy that we're taking this item before us to look at other sustainable ways, alternative construction materials. To Mr. Vega, thank you for your presentation. I know 2017 this program started. A budget motion was asked for the status in 2019. Can you just walk us through specific milestones that were met leading up to today?
Yes. So in doing this project, what we first did was solicit manufacturers to give us information on the various products. We took those solicitations, and I believe there was approximately, I'm going to say about 30 manufacturers that submitted proposals. We narrowed those down based on the various types, and then we did the design for those and included them in our design packages. Some of these went through our normal contracting process included with other sites, and some of these did go to small contractors through our local community contracting. And then from that point on, proceeded to do the installations of the alternative materials, working with the manufacturers to get these installations. And then once they were all completed, started doing the evaluation and monitoring of those.
Thank you for that. I want to recognize the staff at Drum Barracks Park and also the Drum Barracks Civil War Museum for working alongside your team, the Rec and Park staff there, to make sure that I'm happy that we've been used as a testing ground. So based on your assessment, Mr. Vega, and I'm glad the chairman asked about cost comparisons, what, as far as future deployment of these alternative construction materials and designs, what would you recommend we move on based on your assessment for future deployment of these alternative materials?
So initially, I think we would continue monitoring to see that they provide the performance that we've had. And
how long for how much more monitoring do you need?
I'd like to go through. I think I'd recommend another season, both summer and rainy season. We did notice with the heat, the rubber panels seem to have movement in them and deformation. And we'd like to see during the rainy season the porous materials to see how they perform after some time. See if they need maintenance, such as vacuuming, to make sure that the pores are open and such. And then we would have our engineer design do additional evaluation to approve the products for implementation on sites.
So you will continue to monitor all proposed alternative materials. Is that my understanding?
Right now, at this point, yes.
You're not going to pull the plug on the rubber materials and paver?
Well, and I think I think at this time we would, as I said, we would work with the manufacturers to see if they have recommendations for or help us in the evaluation of their materials, why we saw the deformation, why we saw the holes developing in the products, and then at that point, I'll make a determination if we're going to continue moving forward with it.
And are you anticipating in adding more locations during the testing?
We haven't discussed that yet, so we'll have to look at that.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vega.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. O'Farrell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Vega, thank you for your report, and thank the whole Bureau for all of your work and your evaluating all of these surfaces, these materials for the city.
Thank you.
It's something that we've all been talking about for a while now, so it's great that we're exploring this. To continue this, I want to bring up something very, very specific. The materials that I see that are being evaluated right now, that are on the ground, whether it's the Terracon rubber sidewalk or the EcoFlex recycled rubber pavers, I just want to point out something that Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Buscaino are going to know very well when I say it. At the hotel that we often do all the functions for League of National Cities, or the City Summit in Washington, D.C., is surrounded by sidewalks that use a different material entirely. And I'm not sure what the material is, but it seems to be some sort of resin mix that over the past 2 or 3 years has held up very steady. It's literally on Calvert Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. in the Woodley Park area. And I've observed this for the last 3 or 4 years going to the City Summit in Washington, D.C., of which Mr. Buscaino is the current president. And I brought this very site up with Adil Jakalil, our general manager, and to kind of take a look at what material that is. And it's specifically placed around old growth trees. Now, things are very different in the Los Angeles region in terms of the microclimates we have. Vegetation grows exponentially more quickly here than it does other places, especially where they have 4 distinct seasons. Trees grow slower, so it probably causes less obvious disruption on the ground than it does in Los Angeles, when we have trees that will grow several feet a year. So I'm just wondering if perhaps we don't have enough alternative materials on the ground exploring the possibilities. We talk about this a lot in committee as well, and I certainly talk about it a lot, and that is, how can we preserve our mature and older growth trees in the effort to reduce the heat island effect, right? Climate change and everything else. So I would place a real high importance on checking in with the departments in the city of Washington, D.C. On how they manage their urban canopy and the hard surfaces around their street trees, and find out exactly what material they use on Calvert Street Northwest, and then in other locations. But that's the street where I've monitored on my yearly trips to the League of Cities, kind of what they do, and it doesn't seem to be at all the same materials that we're experimenting with. So I just wanted to point that out, and I have brought this up with Adele, and even pointed him out to the street. So perhaps it's something that you all could look into or are planning to look into.
Yes, I can follow up with Mr. Haj Khalil on that, and also reach out to Washington, D.C. to find out what that material is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to echo my colleagues and thank the Bureau of Engineering for all of their great works, and everybody in the Public Works Department for all of the work that you're doing during this pandemic. And I really want to thank our chair as well for partnering with me early on this effort. because back in 2016, when I introduced the initial motion, we knew that there would be materials that probably not work out or not hold up to scrutiny. But the environmental impacts that come with producing and installing these non-porous concrete warranted a deep dive. And as we could see, I had high hopes for the rubber type mixtures, but clearly it didn't hold up in our sunny Los Angeles weather. But I do have a few questions. The pilot has been up and running for about 3 years, and the Bureau of Engineering was monitoring the 15 sites. So you want to monitor for one more season, so one more year? Is that what you said, Robert?
That would be, let's see, probably until the mid-year next year.
Uh-huh.
So go through this summer season and then the rainy season for through 2021. So probably sometime through April or May of next year.
So clearly, you started in 2017, and then the last sites were installed in 2019. Are you trying to see like 2-3 cycles, 2-3 seasons, or are you
Yes.
just okay? So obviously, the ones in 2017 is what you're referring to. That you want to see one more season.
Correct.
To get up. And earlier you talked about you guys initially had about 30 different companies and 30 different products apply.
There were 30 different companies, but the products were probably, they all fell within this range. Some were the breakdown for the different types of materials vary.
So are you just going to be monitoring these 3, or are you going to add any more different types of materials?
For now, these 3, and then we are going to look into the one Mr. O'Farrell recommended.
Okay, because at the LA Zoo, I remember way back, you guys have samples of the different porous surfaces. So I don't know if those were all looked at as well. In the LA Zoo parking lot.
Right.
I don't know if it was done a decade ago, but you had a similar type pilot project.
Yeah, I believe those were porous pavement types, and what we wanted to do through this test was to monitor products or evaluate products that had not been tested to date.
Okay, and then for the cementous pavers, in your slide, I think it's slide 10 or something.
Yes.
You're starting to form quarter-sized pits. Is that just?
Actually, and what that is. What that is that the for those panels, because they're so large, that is the location that they put the anchoring to put it in place. So this is one of the things that we know we're going to have to come back and seal it up so we don't have that surface there. But that's the anchoring for that.
So you're going to take a look at that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And the slag cement,
yes.
The alternative. Can you give a little bit better description? So what is it made of, and how is it made?
So slag is a byproduct of the steel making process. So in making steel, from the furnaces, you have that slag material that's left over. So you can take that and use that in the production of concrete cement. So it's really, you're taking the byproduct and using that as opposed to disposing of it.
And I think you were saying that it's been used in other places as well. Do you know other areas that's used it for 10, 20, 30 years, or is it fairly new?
So what I did mention, there are other materials like this. Fly ash has been used for a number of years. I don't have exact locations, and slag has been used in other locations. And again, I don't know. I don't have specific locations or how long it's been in production.
Okay. And when it comes to greenhouse emissions for the creation of, in particular, the slag cement, or for that matter, the rubber and the cementous pavers, what is the comparison to the traditional concrete? Is it when it comes to greenhouse emissions for the creation of it, is it much better, or is it the same, or?
So with the slag cement, because it is a byproduct, okay, it's the amount of greenhouse gases or the carbon emissions is a lot lower because it's the byproduct. In making Portland concrete cement, there is a lot of CO2 that is created in making that cement.
Well, when you come back to us in the final report or an updated report, if you could, I love how you're comparing the cost factors as well as durability, but also if you could put in the I guess it would be the creation or the green when it comes to environmental concerns and greenhouse gases. I know we like the porousness of these alternative structures, but the actual making of these different pavers, what the greenhouse emissions are and what the environmental impacts are. If
Correct.
it's less, more, or the same. Okay, well, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Members, any additional questions? Okay, well, I just say, I appreciate that we're moving forward on this. As I said earlier, this has been a passion for a long time. When I first did the motion back in 2014, the first one, I got lots of pushback from the departments on trying to do this. And then it's been a while, but we finally have gotten to this point, and I know we're all excited to get to the next point as we move forward. So the recommendation is to instruct BOE to continue monitoring the alternative construction materials to evaluate the feasibility of using these materials in sidewalk repair. Are there any objections to that? Or I guess this format, I should do a roll call. So let me do a roll call on that. That way the public can hear each voice. So Ms. Kidd, if you would call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, aye.
Ruth,
Aye.
Buscaino,
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous then. So we are going to move forward with the study. Colleagues, that's the last item. I guess, Ms. Kidd, is there anything else pending in front of us?
No, Mr. Chair.
Great. So before we end this meeting, again, I want to thank all the department staff for putting so much work behind the scenes to make this meeting run smoothly. Members, thank you for beaming into this meeting, and hopefully as we move forward, these remote meetings will become easier and easier. And then once we have it down to a science, they'll no longer be necessary because this pandemic hopefully will be over. So again, thank you very much. And without objection, I'm going to conclude this meeting. Without objection, we will adjourn this meeting. Seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Good meeting.